perfect. All right. Yeah, I guess we should start then. So, hi everyone. Thanks for coming today to our Global Punx of Colour panel session. So, my name's Stephanie. I'm part of the Decolonise Fest collective, and I'll be moderating the panel along with Marcus. So, this is our Global Punx of Colour panel, and it's a chance for punks of colour from all different scenes and cities and countries around the world to come together and kind of discover what connects us all and how we find community in punk. So in this conversation, we're going to have scene reports from different people. So we have Muna in Houston, Djae who's a member of the punk band Crystal Access, who played this week, and they're going to be talking about their scene in Nairobi, Kenya. Also, we have Screaming Toenail and Brown Belt guitarist Nadz, who's talking about the London punk scene, as well as Alda, who's a tattooist and vocalist in a band talking about the Melbourne scene and the Javaid punk scene. So that's me. I'll leave you to Marcus. He's going to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, I'm Marcus. I'm part of the Decolonise Fest collective. And like Steph said, I'll be helping moderate the panel. And we'll be, each person on the panel will do a little scene report. And then we'll have some questions that we've prepared for them. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if any of you in the audience on the Zoom call have any questions, type them in the chat box and we'll get through them later on. We'll have a chat with you as well. So yeah, thanks for joining us. And yeah, hand over to Steph again.
All right, so I think we're going to start with Djae in Kenya.
Hello,
and
hello.
I'll do a scene report now. Okay.
Hey, how's everybody doing? So my name is Djae. I play guitar for Crystal Access. I also founded the band in the beginning. Yeah, thank you so much for Decolonise Fest for having me and for having the band this past week. We had an absolute blast playing our set. So it's awesome to be here. Thank you so much. Do you want me to go right into the scene report?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Is it okay? What exactly do you want me to sort of talk about?
So I guess you'd be talking about kind of, you know, what's going on there, the different punk bands that are there, kind of any bands that you think they're really cool, or any venues that you play, or festivals that are kind of interesting. Yeah. I know there's kind of like a lot of different festivals going on there.
All right, so right now in Nairobi, on account of the current ongoing pandemic, the scene has been at a bit of a go slow. So we haven't had as many shows, gigs, that kind of thing. It's also like sort of slowed down the ability of bands to put out music. So it's, if I'm being honest, nobody was prepared for Corona and sort of what came with it. So we've sort of been learning on the go. For instance, like since we've done Decolonise Fest, we've had a ton of ideas on what we can do for our own live shows here in Nairobi in terms of organizing virtual events, virtual shows, workshops, panels, that kind of thing. So lately, in terms of punk bands in Kenya, there isn't a lot, to be honest. In the early 2000s, there was a couple of bands like Hagesh, Navaron, but unfortunately, they fizzled out. So right now, there are only two active punk bands, which is Crystal Access and Power Slide. But given how the year has gone, in terms of shows, we haven't been able to do too much, as I mentioned. Right now, we've been in the studio doing our absolute best to try to get out new music. I know Power Slide has been doing the same. We've actually been trying to help them get out their records to like a wider audience and that kind of thing. So all in all, that's more or less it in Nairobi. As it is, it's already difficult to put on rock shows, punk shows, metal shows in Kenya, given that these are pretty niche genres. They've never been mainstream in Africa. Maybe you could argue for countries like South Africa and Egypt, which have a bigger presence and a bigger scene for the music. But for us, it's always been sort of like building from the ground up, which then along the way, we've been learning a lot. We've been doing a lot. We've made a lot of mistakes that we're learning from and so on. So it's a small scene, but we've been doing the absolute best we can given the resources we have. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And I guess we can kind of talk more about kind of Crystal Access and the bands later. maybe kind of, so we go to Muna now in Houston.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Hey, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so before I begin, I just wanted to recognize the Akokisa Nation on whose traditional territory I reside. I acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land, what is known as Houston, modern day. And my pronouns are she, her. So yeah, I am between Houston and Austin. I've been in Austin for about 3 years, but currently I'm in Houston because of COVID. We started the work from home like end of March or so I've been here since then. But I was born and raised in Houston, and I play the drums. I'm in a band currently, we're called Before Words, and it is a shoegaze band. So it's me and 3 other members in that. And then a scene report, yeah, COVID has just kind of, it's really affected any kind of movement in that area really. But one exciting thing about the Houston scene right now is that a friend of mine is opening has opened a DIY venue, punk DIY venue called Red Dwarf. And he's in a band called Fitna, which he just started. His name is Sean. And fellow POC, which is really exciting. And, you know, I've had conversations with him about just kind of making the venue a safe space, and working with a local DIY booking collective that I helped start, which is called Damn Girl. And that started a couple of years back. It's a DIY booking collective and platform that is centering women, non-binary and queer artists of color in Houston. And that kind of came about after just the big wave of the Me Too movement and needing more, needing a more diverse kind of scene here. And then the other thing that I'm heavily involved in is Girls Rock Camp here in Houston. And I've been involved for about a decade now. And we had a bunch of digital content that we did about a month ago, like a week worth of content, just not really workshops, but I would say tutorials on, simple chords on a guitar or keyboard, vocals, zines. It was just kind of across the board. So that was something exciting that we did. And then I was involved with the Austin Girls Rock Camp, virtual camp this year. And that was really exciting. There was a showcase that we did at the end of the week that was on Facebook Live. And my involvement in that was, I did a panel on intersectional feminism and an anti-racism workshop. So that's kind of just a short list of things, but that's a report from Houston, Austin.
Amazing, thanks.
Yeah.
So I guess we can kind of talk more about that after as well and the questions.
Sure.
But so shall we go to Nadz in London?
Hey, can you hear me all right? Yeah, nice, thanks. So yeah, I'm Nadz. I use they, them pronouns. I'm based in London, but I'm from Germany. I'm mostly, I guess, like, I play guitar mostly in brown belt and screaming tenor at the moment, but I do play some other instruments sometimes, quite badly. as well. But I think outside of that, I also am an organizer. So I do a bunch of community organizing kind of outside of the music scene, but I still see it quite related to the punk scene. I think for now, I might like just talk about London, at least like from my perspective. And I'm sure I can talk some about like Germany and the scene there later on. But yeah, I guess like there's like as a capital, London has like a lot of opportunities that other places maybe don't have, or especially I'm from a rural area, so kind of the like city environment means that there's quite a lot of venues around that do, I guess, where punk bands play. I think there's kind of a smaller amount of venues that I would actually call a punk venue. So a lot of my favorite punk bands in London are like seeing loads of venues, but they're not necessarily punk venues. But there is obviously things like New Era Studios in North London, which is where I'm based, and DIY Space, which now is shut down as well. But I'm hoping that we might be able to hear some more news from that side. I think there's a pretty like lively scene in terms of bands. I think obviously Big Journey is one of them. I really like Immigranti as well. Break Up Haircut at the moment, but there's really like loads of bands that continuously pop up. And I think a big part of that is kind of some of the cultures that have been fostered in places like DIY Space, with Decolonise Fest, there's Bent Fest, First Timers, where often a lot of newer bands get the opportunity to play. And I think with Decolonise Fest especially, it's really exciting to also see the link and the look from like an internationalist perspective and linking people up. I think people meet a lot of people through the festival as well. So it was really exciting to be on a panel with all of you as well, and hear about the different scenes. I guess like the COVID impacts, I think have been similar maybe to what others have said as well. The gigs have obviously stopped a bit. There's been loads of like Insta Live type of situations. I think it's like going down now a bit with that, potentially more in the kind of way where bands come together and play and then it gets live streamed rather than all the like home gigs with like acoustic guitars and everything. So I do feel like I've seen a lot of my favorite bands like play, but in a very different way. And I think in the last few months especially, that like the output has gotten a bit slower. And I think you can also see with like the COVID situation here as well, a lot of venues are, even more so than before, are going to be at risk of shutting down. So I think in the long term, there's kind of a big struggle ahead of us, that kind of stuff. I think really briefly, something about the scene here, what I found at least, is that it's a really supportive scene. So a lot of bands are connected, we use gear from each other, even if we don't like play at the same show. There's usually a way found to like get an amp from South to North London. And I think one of my bands, who was a first timers band, I remember we played a gig with Colour Me Wednesday after being together a few months, because the drummer from Colour Me Wednesday was also teaching our drummer, and it's like these kinds of links that do happen quite a lot. So I think once you kind of get to know people a bit, there's a lot of support and sharing happening, and there's things like Decolonise Fest and First Timers to try and get more people into that as well. Yeah, I think I might like stop there. I've talked a bit.
Yeah, that sounds great. And that's all sounds amazing as well. So I think, the last person is Alda. Who's going to talk about Australia and maybe a bit about Java.
Yeah, hello. Well, good to be here. I'm really excited to join this panel of like punks from all over part of the world. especially because it's POC Punx. I'm currently living in Naarm, or known as Melbourne. And I grew up in Java since I was born, but I moved here maybe like 5 years ago. So I know a little bit more about like Java scene than I do, I guess, about like Melbourne scene, but I'll try to talk on both. I'm a vocalist in Lai, and I don't know what else. About Melbourne punk scene. Well, this year, honestly, there's not much going on. I think we have a lot of fundraising for bushfire in Australia that happens in last December, because it happens throughout, like from November to February. Basically, we've been just smoked out by like bushfire. The smoke's like covering all like from Sydney, Brisbane to Melbourne. We don't get to do many things outside because most of the times there's fire warning in a lot of places. And other than that, like it's just like smoke outside all the time. And when it's done, well, I mean, like by the end of bushfire around like February, we do a lot of like more like fundraising gigs. But in March, we have lockdown COVID. We have until now. Yeah, it's been pretty absurd year, but we have like a break in May where we do like some bands do like live gigs, but there's not much going on because literally that was like the couple of weeks we all get to get out. And yeah, in May there's also like, I think most of people's focus was on Black Lives Matter. So a lot of organizing happening about like doing Black Lives Matter on the street. And I think that was the biggest rally that Melbourne have ever seen since the last anti-Iraq movement in like 2002. So it has about like 50,000 people on the street. I gotta say though, even though it was like a massive crowd, we were trying our best to be socially distancing. Everybody was using masks. There's like hand sanitizer everywhere. Organizers was like giving out masks and hand sanitizing. And there was no case back afterwards linked back to our action. The stage lockdown that happens afterwards was because some people in quarantine break their quarantine because one of the security guard that was dodgily hired by the local government, like basically hook up with one of the person in quarantine and spread it everywhere in Melbourne. And because of that, we're in lockdown still. We don't know when we even still get to get out. We're on stage 4 lockdown, which means like Victoria and Melbourne, which means we don't even get to get out of the house and see other people. So honestly, most of the things happen just online, like fundraisings for like, well, I guess for the context of Black Lives Matter, obviously, in Australia, we are focusing it more to Indigenous owner of the land, the Kulin people of, the Wurundjeri people of Kulin Nation in Melbourne. Yeah, so mostly we just doing like fundraisings online, and other punks also just doing fundraisings online, making shirts, making patches, making stickers, and then donating the fund to Indigenous movements. And yeah, literally there's not much going on. Meanwhile, in Java, like I think I told you guys before, but like I haven't been going home for like 4 years because of my visa situation. But basically, yeah, in Java, there's another kind of things that is going on, which is like trying to fight the new law that they're trying to imply, which is basically going to try to sell off the land for cheap for foreign investors. So, and making a law that gonna make it legal to underpay workers from Indonesia. So everyone was trying to fight that, and that is basically what I've seen. So like from afar, like the activism that happens there. So despite of COVID, people are just still doing protests. And yeah, since the government is encouraging people to not believe that COVID is real, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, I guess that's not much going on other than that. Just COVID, increasing repression, and yes, that. Is there anything else you want me to talk about?
No, I mean, that sounds great. I guess we can go deeper into different things during the questions. But thanks everyone for those scene reports. Those are really, really interesting. I think we can start asking questions now. I mean, Marcus, do you want to kick off with the first question?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Really interesting, and yeah, the common theme seems to be COVID, which is just really fucking up our year. So 2020 needs to be over soon. Yeah, basically, I've got a question here, which any of you panelists can jump in and answer. So how did you all get into punk? What was your gateway song or band? So this is quite hard. I never know what that is, but yeah, can you tell us the first song or band that you got into and how you found that and how you got into punk? If someone wants to jump in, or I'll pick you.
I don't mind starting if that's cool.
Okay, cool.
So growing up in Kenya, like punk rock, just rock in general was never mainstream. Sorry, I have like a couple of Crystal Axis members here with me, so they will be chiming in every now and then. So growing up in Kenya, punk rock was never a mainstream thing. There were never punk shows. There was never this or that, at least in my childhood. So the first interaction I got with punk rock was actually from video games. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, which is getting remastered. So that definitely played like a big role in my discovery of the music. Because listening to it, that's probably the first time I heard the Distillers, bands like System of a Down, so on and so forth. So as I got a little bit older, I spent a little bit more time researching, learning more about these bands, and sort of learning more about punk rock, what it entails, what it's all about. Then when I was around, I think 11 or 12, somehow, I still don't know how, I watched this documentary by Green Day called Bullet in a Bible, where they played this massive show at Hyde Park, I think, in the UK, but that shit blew my mind. That was it. So I watched the documentary from start to finish. At the end, I was like, holy shit, this is genuinely what I want to do in my life. So for me, it sort of just started from there. So once I sort of figured out which bands I was into, what kind of sounds and music I liked, I spent genuinely as much time as possible discovering as much punk as I could during my teenage years. So that was sort of my introduction to punk and how I am who I am today and how I am in the position I am today.
God bless the internet. What was the first song that you remember of Tony Hawk's? You remember which?
Yeah, dude, I remember. It was Seneca Falls by the Distillers.
Oh yeah, I love Distillers.
Hands down, one of the best punk songs ever.
Yeah, that's a great song. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in? What about you, Alda? I'm gonna pick on you. Alda.
Yeah, why not?
What was your first song? The first punk song you remember? Like, was it something in Indonesia?
It was from Zines first. So my uncle is already a punk. Like he's like a punk activist artist from Jogja. So he was active in Taring Padi, like a lefty grassroots artist thing. So when I was a kid, I was raised in a really religious house, and I do not have access to most things at all. Like I'm mostly kept at home, but like my uncle usually sneaks some zines on like random punk shit. Like, oh, this is how you steal bike. This is how, I don't know. It's just so upset. Like, this is how, just like practical DIY shit to make dodgy things. But I just thought like, as a teenager, I was like, this is so fucking cool. And then, yeah, I get into like looking for music after that. I think the first thing that I heard was Homicide. This is not necessarily punk, but they came from hardcore punk scene in Java. But their band is actually like hip hop. This is a really good political hip hop band with like really strong lyrics in Indonesia. And I know anyone listening should check them out. They're fucking great. A lot of their lyrics are in Indonesian. Some are in English, but I think the Indonesians one hits way harder. So I listened to them and I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's like more attracted to like more anarcho punk kind of stuff. And then I listened to Crass, I think the first international punk stuff that I heard. And I just thought like, yeah, basically I'm just really interested in like political punk bands, and seeing Crass and Homicide together, I was like, this is just dope. Yeah, then from there I get into punk scene.
Thank you. I want that zine. How to Steal a
Yeah,
Punk.
no, I forgot. It was pink and yeah, it just full of like, I think I remember it was like 90s and there was like a lot of like, yeah, just like actually like the how to make your own remedy is already like really like actually quite wholesome stuff, but also some stuff that I look back, I think like, yeah, but like DIY, I'm not sure, but you know, I'm still glad I get to read that.
Thank you.
Yep, that's all.
Nadz or Muna, you want to tell us your first song, your first punk song that you remember?
Yeah, I just want to say I love these punk origin stories. I relate a lot to what Jay and Alda have said, because Jay mentioned Green Day, and I think I was 12 or 13, and I bought my first cassette tape, which was Green Day's Dookie album, and yeah, I was just blown away since then. I think it was Basket Case that I first heard, and I was like, okay, like I'm into it. And then but relating to Alda, like I also, you know, as a teen wasn't really going to shows much because I was also raised in, you know, a similar household. And so the other thing that was kind of a big introduction for me was the Vans Warped Tour. Yeah, my brothers and I, that was one of the things that, you know, my mom knew that we kind of did as siblings. We went to the Vans Warped Tour every year, and I was introduced to bands like Bad Religion and you know, Bouncing Souls, NoFX, like a lot of melodic punk bands. Going to the Warped Tour. And then it was around 2001, I started getting on the internet, and, you know, LiveJournal was a big kind of platform for me where I met a lot of punks and particularly like South Asian punks, which was really exciting for me. I met a friend in Chicago, Ravi, who was writing zines at the time. I didn't know what zines were. And so he was writing a zine called Indian Attack. And it was just, the rest is history. So, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I remember that album, Dookie. I'm just gonna jump in and say that my first album was Offspring, Smash.
Yep,
Smash.
remember that one too. Around the same time.
Yeah, do you remember the burnt CDs? Everyone would just make pirate copies of CDs and you'd print your own cover.
Yeah, I didn't buy anything when I was a teenager. I had no money.
Sorry, band. Nadz?
I think probably if I'm gonna be like completely honest, it was like Paramore or something like that. That I like. So when you said the Warped Tour, that was like one of the things that I like wish I could have gone to, but was always like something that I like was dreaming of, I guess. And I guess where I'm from, like none of the bands that I would kind of get to know from like more mainstream ways would ever like come here either. So like, and I guess I also didn't spend much time online, so I only really got into like properly looking up different bands and that kind of stuff when I was a bit older. But I did grow up in an area in Germany where we have loads of kind of anarchist, autonomous youth centers. And I guess like the DIY culture there was like, I guess was just lived. I didn't necessarily always understand that that was like punk in and of itself in the beginning, especially. But just something that was quite ingrained into the history of, I guess, like organizing in the area that I'm from. So we went to punk shows in like different kinds of venues, some of them autonomous youth centers, some of them just kind of music centers that were somewhat lefty or sometimes like more radical, some I guess more radical than others, but usually in Germany quite linked to like anti-fascist action, that kind of organizing, which obviously has like, especially in Germany, its own like issues with their positioning, especially on like BDS and Palestinian solidarity. But I guess like there's also a lot of organizing that kind of goes hand in hand with the music. So I definitely see myself as coming more from the organizing realm and that kind of realm into the music scene. And kind of in London, I think I like properly found foot in the, I guess, like music scene where I got to know loads of bands. And I remember like Screaming Toenail, who I now play with, but I didn't at the time, was like one of the bands that I first saw, the punk bands, when I came to London. And that was pretty mind blowing for me to see it and then like follow bands and like go to gigs where I like knew who was playing, even though they weren't like a famous band that was on magazines and shit. And that was a really great experience, I think.
Thank you.
Amazing. So kind of like following on from that, once you kind of found out you love punk, how did you kind of find your own respective punk scenes, and what were they like when you first got there? Was it like welcoming to you, or was it supportive?
Well, for me, the first time I've been to a rock show in Kenya, I think I was 14 or 15 at the time. So I grew up in a very, very strict and religious household. We're all Muslim. My mom is very Muslim. So we all raised hella Muslim. So going out for like gigs, that kind of thing, it wasn't a thing that happened like at all. So the first time I got to go for a punk show, or just a rock show in general, I went with my older sister, my older half sister actually. So it took like 2 weeks of convincing my mom, like, look, just let me go. I will behave. I will be good. I will not do anything. I did a lot of things. So yeah, so the first time I was like 14, 15, watching a rock show. I think my biggest takeaway at that time is all around me, it was like, as I was getting into punk and rock in general, all around me, it was sort of the same sentiment of like, oh, rock is a white people kind of thing. Black people don't do this. And like, when you'd go on MTV and all these different channels, that's kind of what it seemed like. There were no black guys on TV. No one was sort of doing this sort of thing. There were no like dedicated rock shows or stations in Kenya for rockers or that kind of thing. So I went for my first gig and I saw a bunch of black people who looked like me doing this. So that really...
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing. It definitely played a big role in my life and how now I started to approach music in terms of rock, punk rock and all that. So literally a day after the first rock show I had been to, literally 1 day later is when we started Crystal Axis. So when we started out, we were called Inertia. We were still in high school, a bunch of kids. But if it wasn't for that welcoming openness in the rock and the metal community at my first show, I probably would not be doing what I'm doing today in terms of music, Crystal Axis, or just being who I am in general. So yeah, so my first experiences with it was everyone was very supportive. We played our first show. We were a bunch of 15-year-old kids who snuck into the nightclub. We actually had to bribe the bouncer to let us in to play our own show, which was weird, but it was an experience. So we get there. As soon as we got there, guys were like, oh, you and so-and-so's brother. We saw you here last month. You guys need amps, you need this, you need that. So it was very welcoming, very supportive. Even as we grew up, we got older and that sort of thing, everybody has been very supportive about it. So in Kenya, there's like a real sense of togetherness and camaraderie when it comes to the punk, rock, and metal scene in general. So that's how it was on my end.
That's amazing. How do you find that you just met everyone at school?
So in Crystal, there's this one guy called Neil I used to play guitar with. So we were like, dude, we're gonna start a band, but there were literally no drummers in the school. So my little brother Abuga, he was like, you know what, dude, I'm gonna learn how to play the drums. We're like, cool, dude, do it. And that's literally how we started Crystal Axis. That's genuinely our story.
It's always the best band stories. There was just some drums somewhere and someone needs to play them, which is always the way it works. All right, I mean, Nadz, do you have any? Or Alda, do you have any update on your scene?
I started in West Java, like after I found out like homicide in Christ, I started looking for like local punk scene. I found out like anarchist scene first, and then from there I found like the local punk scene. I guess at that time I was fresh off like this really religious household. Really, I mean, it sounds quite similar with Jay. Actually, my family is really intensely Muslim. So that was fresh after I get kicked out from the house because I don't want to wear hijab anymore. Yeah, so after that I was just like entering punk scene with high hopes, you know, like, yeah, this is my people. Like people who are not religious, whatever. But then yeah, the sexism and misogyny in our scene is really intense. Like some of us, like a couple of years ago, well, not me, like Hera from like my scene as well in Bandung, she make a documentary called Ini Scene Kami Juga, which means this is our scenes too, interviewing like 13 girls, including me, like basically about like how do we feel about like in the scene, basically just like exploring how do we feel like, you know, growing up in this scene, etc. And accidentally all of us just talking about like how intensely like really rapey it is and how misogynistic it is and how sexist it is. We don't even talk with each other about this, like about talking about that, but apparently individually every single one of us feel like we need to bring this up, because I realized there's like this mystification of like Indonesian scene. I think not only me, I think like the other girls also feel like, okay, internationally it feels like there's this mystification of our scene being like this exotic tropical island punks, and just like, oh yeah, look at this tropical punks making, you know, gigs in islands and stuff. Wow, so cool. But because of that, they overlook like what's actually in the scene, like the intense sexism and like how the like women, non-binary and trans, like any LGBT people in the scene are feeling intensely repressed, and how very, I don't know, intensely machoistic it is. So that wasn't really a pleasant experience. And because of that, I travel around Southeast Asia looking for, I don't know, you know, better community. I hitchhiked to like, I don't know, I'd go to Malaysia, Burma, Thailand, and Myanmar to check around. And I recognize apparently not all punk scene is that awful. Other punk scenes, honestly, that I end up like living a little bit there. Like I really love Kuala Lumpur scene. Like they're really much more into the actual politics, not just like wearing the emblems, wearing the, you know, the patches and repeating the slogans. Like, yeah, I think there's a lot of improvement that could happen in the scene that I came from. But yeah, Kuala Lumpur scene has been very fucking welcoming. I feel like straight at home there. And like Thai punk scene is a bit different. Like as far as I was there, it's more like street punks and stuff. And Myanmar punk scene is fucking awesome and lovely. I love them. Yeah, so it fixed my, you know, impression of like, okay, punk scene doesn't have to be so fucked. It doesn't have to be having this like weird, it's like it's like when I grew up, I feel like everybody have to prove themselves to be so macho, you know, like to be like the idea of being tough is like being cool with this like daily sexism, daily misogyny, daily like just normalizing all of these rape culture going on while we were drinking together and going to gigs. So yeah, I don't know, I'm just really happy to discover that the rest of South Asian scene that I stumbled onto was fucking awesome. But yeah, so it was like a mixed feeling of pleasant and not really pleasant experience. Yeah, but also there is other amazing punk scene in Indonesia that I really like Balinese punk scene. Like I know a lot of people talk down about like, oh yeah, going to Bali, like feeling like a tourist. But honestly, if you overlook, like if you don't go to the tourist spots, Bali is actually amazing. It's actually what I feel like, because of the religious repression in Indonesia is getting so intense. Bali feels like a little oasis because they're the only one that is like, that is not a majority Muslim. They're majority Hindu and Buddha. So because they're different, they get to make different rules. They get to, all this tourism money, get them to have like autonomy against Indonesian government. So I don't know, it's just much more exciting, different things going on there. I think the activism is much more rife as well. And the DIY punk scene is so exciting. They make a lot of like gigs in abandoned buildings and stuff. It's just, yeah, I'm just saying like, there's also like scenes that I think people should check out if they ever go to Indonesia. And yeah, I forget what I was talking about. Yeah, so it's all mixed, you know. It's always good and bad in every scene. And obviously not everyone in Bandung like is sexist and rapey. There's like great people that try to change this thing also, but I can only speak about like what I grew up in. And yeah, unfortunately that wasn't so ideal.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate. I think kind of a lot of people kind of get that when they first get into the punk scene of like thinking that this is going to be their home, and then you know it's not as perfect as you want it to be, or for whatever reason, which is really unfortunate. I mean, do you think you kind of find, now you said you found other scenes that are better, but within kind of your first scene, do you find community with like, you know, the other women and non-binary punks kind of outside?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think in Balinese scene, they're more aware of like LGBT rights as well, and like they're more like trying to be more inclusive. Jogja as well, because I think there's more like big trans presence in Jogja, like because it's more of an art city, while Bandung is more like a student modern city. And it's just a really old scene that have really, I don't know, a lot of hierarchy that is already building since the beginning, like in the beginning of the scene in the 90s. So I guess there's just a lot of, I don't know, social structure that needs to be changed within the scene for that to happen. But there's also like really cool feminists in the scene that try to change this with making like good documentary about this, making discussion about this. So the Ini Scene Kami Juga, or like This Is Our Scene Too documentary has been like screened around like in Indonesia, and while they're screening it, they're also trying to open communications within punk and try to bring this topic to life, you know, like trying to stop pretending that this is not a thing. And I think those discussions have been like not always well accepted, but it has been, I think, quite helpful. At least some scenes now like trying to contact people, either people that are involved or like at least some feminists in their scenes, like how can we change this and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thanks. So Mina, do you have anything to add to the question about what your scene was like, if it was supportive when you first got into it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, it took me, I've only actually felt some kind of inclusivity in maybe the last like 5 years. And I've been at it since the late 90s, early 2000s. Just because I just continuously kind of got excited about certain spaces, and then I would become disillusioned by them for some of the reasons that Alda and Jay mentioned. Well, Alda specifically, but it just was funny that Jay and Alda both mentioned growing up in religious Muslim homes, because so did I. Which is too funny to me that all three of us, but so I honestly was not going to many shows early on, like in my teen years. Yeah, hello gang. So once I did start going to shows, yeah, it was mostly just my brothers and I. We were typically the only South Asians there, much less people of color. You know, so it was kind of years of that. And then I remember when James Spooner came out with his documentary film Afropunk, he went on a tour across the US, and he stopped in Houston and did a film screening at a local venue here. And that was really exciting for me because it was kind of my first time seeing that, you know, there was this whole other world of punk that I just was not aware of. And so, you know, it was like I got into that, and then I got into Riot Girl, which was also very white. And so, you know, it was exciting on that kind of level that, oh, there's all these women that kind of formed this scene, and you know, centered women, but then, you know, it just felt like women of color were missing from that. So so kind of the main way that I cultivated it for myself was like online spaces. That's kind of where I felt the most seen and most comfortable. And so I kind of created those spaces for myself, and they just kind of ended up becoming bigger than anything that I ever thought. For example, there's a forum that I've moderated for, gosh, maybe since 2011, and it's called Desi Punx. And so that's like just punks all over the world, South Asian, that, you know, we're basically a family now. And I was just added to another group, POC Punx Worldwide, which I got really excited about. So I'm still finding those spaces that I feel really like, I feel like cultivating within. And like I mentioned before, Girls Rock Camp also was a big kind of shift for me within the scene, because I got involved with that, and the director, who I've worked with for a decade, and she's half Vietnamese, half Mexican. And it was just so empowering for us as like women of color to kind of cultivate this project where, you know, we're empowering girls and non-binary and trans youth to pick up instruments. And you know, it didn't matter if you had experience or had ever played an instrument or were in a band. And that's been really amazing to see, because over the last decade, I've seen campers that started out with our rock camp, and, you know, some of them have felt empowered to start bands themselves. Some of them have transitioned. Some of them have become volunteers in the camp. So that's one space where I felt really safe and seen, which I'm really thankful for. But ultimately, yeah, I'm still trying to find a space outside of the internet and Girls Rock Camp to really feel like a community. So,
well, hopefully we can be that community too.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here and meeting you all. It's so awesome.
Extend the Decolonise Fest community around the world. Thanks for all those answers. I'm just looking at the time and realizing that we are technically running over. We'll try not to run over too much, because obviously Alda's in Australia, so that's going to keep her up for
I got nothing to do.
Yeah, we've got.
But Marcus, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. I'm really enjoying it, so we could talk for hours, but
I know.
So the next question, it's a bit more. Yes, you've all talked about your local punk scene. What does the punk community mean to you, and how has it helped you in your life? So it's a bit more existential, like. If anyone's got any like things they want, like, how has it helped you? I don't know. Yeah, what did you benefit from the punk scene? What, you know, coming into it, was it like liberatory for you, or if anyone's got anything to say on that?
I want to say something.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, sure. So because I've been talking pretty bleak about the punk scene, I want to say something positive too, which is like, this is an actual thing. I'm actually feeling really grateful about the punk community in general, because despite of like how the first punk scene that I stumbled onto, the international punk scene has been fucking helpful. Like, I honestly can't be in Australia right now if that wasn't for the informations that I got from my punk friends, you know, like from punk travelers that go through Indonesia. And at that time, because I could speak English, so I would be speaking to them, and then I get a lot of information on basically figuring out how to move between countries and stuff. Like, all of these shits are usually not so accessible to us, because usually these kind of informations are only kept for like rich people or like people who can access it. So in a way, like I'm fucking grateful I get all of this information from like international punks that travels through and tell me what about, you know, like how it is possible to live in another country, etc. Like if I didn't know that, you know, like dumpster diving or squatting it, etc. is a thing, I wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't even think about going here, because how the fuck am I gonna afford it? Yeah, like there are definitely like positive impacts in my life that I get from connecting to punk scenes. And yeah, other than that, like also it helps with the activism that was happening in Indonesia, because at that time I was like in an anarchist punk community, and we received a lot of help as well from international punks doing like fundraising for our movement. The first info house that I made with my friends in 2008 in Bandung, that was also helped by like punks in London, actually, I think. Now that I look back, wait a minute. Yeah, it was actually helped by our friends in London. Yeah, we otherwise we wouldn't be able to rent that space. You know, we run workshop there every day, like for the local villages, and we make like English classes. We make like workshop about like you know, making a DIY shit. All of these shit only happened because we got support from international community. So yeah, definitely changed my life. In a good way, not only traumatizing way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the great thing about punk. It's obviously it's got its downsides, but then I feel like for me, I'm just gonna say for me, the punk community became like this family, global. I know it sounds corny, but I know that I can go anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the world, and find a punk and a couch to sleep on. You know,
Exactly.
and people always ask me like, "Oh, how do you like travel so much and go everywhere?" I'm like, well, just like you said, like, you know, dumpster diving, hitchhiking, finding not paying for hotels, you know, and staying with punks. Yeah, it's like a global family. Does anyone else have anything to say on that?
I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
do you want to go?
No, go.
Cheers. I guess like I've often been in spaces that have been where like I'm the punk in it, I have a few punk friends in it, but we're not, I guess like not everyone would describe themselves as that. And I think more recently in kind of organizing spaces as well, I've really learned to appreciate that, I think, more than I did before. And that is partly because I think people bring different things to stuff, but I think I guess like what the community has really given me is a kind of network of people that you can call back on, even if there's people that I don't know but a friend of mine knows. I feel like there is kind of this care and this warmth that you often get. And I think especially in political punk circles, and in Germany at least where I'm from, like some of them have sadly become quite depoliticized. But people might not understand every issue completely, but they really care about people, and they really care about making people feel all right and helping where they can. And I think there's kind of this practical kind of solidarity that I've been really lucky to have, and I've also like learned a lot from. And I think more recently I've been organizing a bit. Some of the community organizing in London has been around Sister Space, which is a domestic violence service for African heritage survivors that has been forced to move and almost shut by Hackney Council. You can like find out more on their Instagram and support the campaign as well. But I think it's been really amazing organizing with them, and I think a lot of the time you've kind of seen there's kind of an intergenerational organizing. There's really loads of different kind of political identities, and you can always count on the punks to show up, to be in a space, to try and hold a space, to like go to the shop and get a sat. Like there's so much support of this practical support network that we have, and people do show up and they bring what they can, and it's often also the people that will show up, do these kinds of things, and then you like don't see them until the next thing happens. And it's kind of these, I guess that's some of the bits in the punk community that I've really learned to appreciate and enjoy, and that I'm trying to, I guess, do a bit more of as well. I think there's a lot of I guess like care and solidarity work happening, and and people are not necessarily in it to take the credit for it. It's just what you said, Marcus. It's like it's a family, it's a community, and of course there's like difficulties all the time as well, but people are just in it to support each other.
Yeah, dysfunctional, functional family. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can relate to the dysfunctional, functional. Yeah, and to be more positive about it, yes, I agree with Marcus. I could literally be anywhere and find a place to stay or get support from, you know, the locals, just through that vast network. And then there's just, you know, there's so much work being done by punks of color, just that I've discovered, you know, in the last year or two. There's a Black and Brown Punk Fest in San Antonio that was started by Daisy Salinas, which one of my best friends in Austin and I were like, we need to start a band just so we can play that, you know, fest. And so look out for Yellowface 2021. My Korean friend Mark and I are gonna start a two-piece. But I also saw a question in the chat box about documentaries. So some of the documentaries that have inspired me are Beijing Punk. I don't know if you've seen that one. That's a great film. Los Punx. Los Punx is a documentary about the scene out in California. Afro-punk, of course, like I mentioned earlier. And then Thakwacore is another documentary that you can see me for like a millisecond in there. But yeah, so community and just that network and still, you know, finding all these amazing kind of venues to be involved in, like Decolonise. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic.
Jay, do you have anything to say? Just one thing, because of time, are people happy to go till 4:30? If any of the panelists have to leave, let us know. But it'd be cool to just do a little bit more and then have some quick questions from the audience, if that's cool. Do you have anything to add, Jay?
Yeah. I mean, not to be too cheesy, but personally, for me, at least from my personal perspective, I would not be who I am today if it wasn't for punk rock. In terms of my personality, the decisions I've made in life, the things I revere, that sort of thing. Honestly, I studied law in uni, and truthfully, if it wasn't for punk rock and getting stuck into the genre, what the ideology is about and that sort of thing, I would not be where I am today or who I am today, because it shaped my perspective in so many different ways. I mean, in terms of the community itself, everybody is open and welcome. You have people from all sorts of backgrounds, whether you're black, white, whether you're straight, LGBT, it doesn't matter. It was a very welcoming and opening scene in that way. So I've met a lot of people thanks to that. And also it has very much broadened my horizons in very many ways. For instance, I wouldn't be reading about prison abolition if it wasn't for the fact that some punk I know somewhere sent me a PDF about it, you know, that sort of thing. So that's sort of the impact it's had on my life, which I can't downplay it. I am who I am because of because of punk rock, the community, everything is tied to it. Yeah. I think of songs in like a dark way, but
it's amazing. And yeah, that makes so much sense. And so I guess kind of going on from that, sorry. It would be good to kind of know, like, I know kind of it depends where you are in the world, like, you know, what is it like to be a person of color in your punk scene? I mean, obviously I know some of you are like the minority in the punk scene, or sometimes you're the majority or kind of the normative in the punk scene, but is there like, did you ever get any backlash with people kind of saying this isn't something that you're supposed to be doing, or, you know, that kind of conversation?
I mean, like in Kenya, for instance, I know I mentioned earlier, the general attitude was that rock music, punk rock, this sort of thing is like a white genre. So for a while, that's something we really had to work against. So we were swimming against the current because of that. But with time, pretty much everybody here is a person of color. So like 95% of our scene is people of color, which has been nice. It's amazing being able to walk into a show, an event, and see people that look like you on a stage doing what you want to do. I think representation is 100% important, and it goes a really long way, because if it wasn't for discovering bands like Bad Brains and so on and so forth, I probably would have given up a long time ago. But it's nice to be able to see someone who's like you, who believes in what you believe in, sort of doing the same thing you believe in.
Amazing. Yeah, that makes so much sense. I feel like quite similarly as well. Does anyone else have any other comments on their scene?
Yeah, Alda, I wonder if I'm gonna pick you. Because I came to Melbourne as a punk of color, so I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say about that in Australia, if you've got anything to say.
I think it's been amazing. I feel really, I don't know, I mean, honestly, when I got here, I was just like trying to get keep my visa with working hard and like studying heaps. So I don't socialize that much, but people have been really sweet and supportive. And there's a lot of initiatives that try to open space for, you know, people of color, and like, I don't know, shit that we gotta say, like things like Girls Radio Offensive, or like radio show like You Can Be You by Lost in Folk, and like that recently also have Haikal with it. Like basically like they also like open space about this conversation, like in the radio space. And also, yeah, I think people here in Melbourne have been quite like trying to be more, I don't know, inclusive, like consciously. So yeah, I have nothing bad to say about it, because I've been feeling like I don't know, a warm welcome, I guess, yeah, by most people that I know, at least. Yeah, I'm just trying to recall if I have like any shitty experience that are close to like any racist shit. Not personally, I think. Like I've been feeling that there are space made for us in gigs, and like even outside gigs, or yeah.
Cool. That's really great. That's really good to have like that good experience. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that question? Or we can move on to the next one.
I can go. I guess like in my scene in London here now, with like people that I'm around, I don't really feel that as an issue necessarily. Like the bands that I play in, the people that come to those kinds of gigs, depending on where it is. So it sometimes depends a bit if you kind of get a broader crowd. I think when I first started, that maybe wasn't the case so much, and it was also slightly because I hadn't really found my scene. I think I'm like I think in Germany especially, there's kind of a big like right-wing punk scene, and then while I might like argue that isn't really punk, they do market themselves as that, and I guess like they can, I guess like organize quite well as well. So there's kind of a lot of like really overt kind of racism in those kinds of scenes. I think in like the more autonomous scenes, there was just a lot of, I guess like you don't really look punk, like the classic type of things that people come up with. I don't feel like I've had to deal with that for a while, which is quite lucky, and I think it shows that I've like found people. So I don't know how like your experiences have been in London. I know that you both are about here as well. So that might be quite different. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just quickly add. I mean, I think I started getting into punk in London through what I would say is the white punk. I feel like there's quite a few punk scenes in London. and there's multiple. There's like the street punks. I started off as like the drunk, cider drinking street punks that hung out in Camden, which was predominantly white people, and like a lot of crossover with fascists, weirdly enough. There were a lot of like skinheads. It was apolitical street punk scene. Everyone's like, we're apolitical. And so like, you know, you'd be like drinking on the street and then there'd be like some skinheads, and then later on I'd find out he was a Nazi. Weird. So yeah, that was the world that I was in. And there was one, and actually I've reconnected with, actually funnily enough, Shadeen from Big Joni, the drummer from Big Joni. We always reminisce because we both met on the bridge in Camden drinking cider. So but we, you know, I can remember the few punks of color. There was, you know, me, Shadeen, and then a handful of other people, which I've started to reconnect with over the years. That was a long time ago. And then I got into the crusty anarcho punk scene, which was a lot more political and PC or whatever, but also very white. And there was also a handful of people of color. And then I got more into like the anarcho organizing side of things. And yeah, so now I've got this weird spread of, I don't know, experiences in all the punk scenes in London. And to me, the POC punk scene with Decolonise Fest and the queer punk scene, I think it's quite, to me, it seems like quite a new scene, as in like the last sort of 10 years or maybe 5 years, 5 to 10 years, it's a new thing. But before that, I think the punk scene was very white dominated, even though we live in a very multicultural city. That was my experience. But when I talk to other people who got into punk in the last 5 years, they have a different experience. You know what I mean? In London, anyway. But yeah, sorry. We're running out of time.
Let's get going.
Yeah. Have we still got anyone else want to say anything about that? What are we on?
I guess the next one is there a support network for people of colour in your local scenes? But that's similar to the last question.
Yeah, we've kind of covered that. Unless someone want to speak about a POC network in their local scene, or if not, we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, there's not enough of us, I guess.
Yeah. That's all right. Do you want to do the next question then, Marcus?
Oh yeah, I can do it. How do you think global punk communities can support each other in terms of promoting bands, helping other punks of color find community, and skill sharing? So yeah, that's quite a good question for us all. How can we support each other, especially people in the Southern Hemisphere?
Well, I think like events like Decolonise Fest are really a really good place to start. Decolonise Fest, and I'm talking.
We're over here making the next album, homie.
So Decolonise Fest as an event has been, in my opinion, a really amazing place to start. Because of the support network we've managed to get out of it. Like since we've learned about Decolonise Fest, what it stands for, and all that, the bands we've discovered, the people we've spoken to, the people we interact to, it's been immeasurable. You literally you can't put like a price on that. So Decolonise Fest has been an amazing place to start in terms of who we've met personally, also in terms of the coverage we've got as the band, with our music, everything we've been putting out. I also feel like workshops would go a long way. I know Decolonise Fest had a couple of workshops this week. So doing more of that along the year, during the year, would be amazing. For instance, like for us at least, we've been learning everything sort of like DIY, and because of that, we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. Like no regrets, like yeah, we fucked up, but we learned from it. So we've grown from the experiences, but it also helps to have more established individuals and artists sort of telling us, this is how you go about this is how you do this. Like for instance, maybe like a year or so ago, we played a show where we were getting paid X amount of money. There was a newer band in the scene that was also making the debut show. So they approached us, they're like, hey, how much are you guys getting paid for this show? Because we think we're being shortchanged. And so we told them how much we were being paid, and it did in fact turn out they were being shortchanged because we were getting paid about 4 times the amount they were getting paid. So sort of having that openness, that transparency, being able to lend a hand to more newer bands, new punks in the scene, that's definitely the way to go in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks. We'll definitely more workshop. I think that'll be, this Decolonise Fest has been a good experiment of like doing online workshops. So hopefully we'll have more over the year.
Yes, please.
Anyone else?
I can go.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with Jay in terms of skill sharing. That's really important to me in terms of workshops and things, because it was actually a workshop that I learned kind of the basics of the music program that I produced my first track on, learning a music program called Soundtrap. But I think spaces like I mentioned earlier, POC Punx Worldwide, that's just kind of gotten off the ground, and I know they're already creating like Google Docs and Excel sheets with, you know, who's in what city and who can help book shows, and, you know, creating zines and things like that. So I think virtual networking has kind of been the main space for me, really, that's helped in terms of networking in that way. I'm also curious about, you know, post-COVID, and, you know, I know a lot of venues and scenes and just individuals have said a lot in terms of Black Lives Matter, and you know, are we gonna see kind of people put their money where their mouth is type thing? Like, you know, there's venues, local venues that are saying, you know, we want to shift the culture of our scene and create more spaces. I'm just curious what that's gonna look like when things open up, because we're still on lockdown, and whether we'll actually see that. But I think, yeah, just online networking, fests like this, Facebook groups, that's kind of where it's at, I feel.
Well,
You want it?
so I guess I can only talk about what I've seen work really good for the scene that I was in before. Like, I don't know what, like, I honestly don't know how we can support each other outside virtual while we're still having COVID anyway. But anyway, yeah, I just want to mention the part that I think have been useful for my scene in Indonesia. So I remember, I think punk scene in Indonesia started around like 90s, right? Like 92. And it was started with street punks. And then after that, there's a lot of shows. And then in shows, people start just having like a lot of corporate sponsor shows. And only until one of the band from my city got basically helped by punk friends in Europe to tour to Europe, that we see something like really changing. So basically after they tour to Europe, they go back home coming with this story of like different cultures. Like they witness like how it is to be punk in Europe, like, I don't know, basically knowing about squatting, dumpster diving, all that, and making DIY gigs, which is like what matters most. And I remember there was like a fundraising from punks in Europe that helped punks in my city, like in Bandung, West Java, to get like equipments for making DIY shows. And that really changed the scene, because from then on, there's not only like corporate sponsor gigs, but also DIY gigs, because from there, it's basically becoming possible. Because before, like, who can, you know, afford having all of these equipments? But basically since that help and like since that tour, it empowered heaps, like it empowered like the scene a lot. And that idea actually spread all over the punk scene in entire Indonesia, I think. And I think a lot of those initiatives has been like done in Melbourne as well. Like I see friends that like Hardcore Victim trying to like bring Asian bands, or like, yeah, like basically Asian bands like to Melbourne, or like Lost and Fog also like trying to bring like punks from other places in the country like to Melbourne. Basically, I think this cultural exchange is really important. And when they go back home, they go back with like other kind of like reference of culture, reference of idea of how punks and other side of the world can do things and or like do things differently, so they can try to see like what they can apply to their own places. I think this is like an actual like I mean, it sounds really simple. It's just like touring or like bringing bands over. But I think from what I witnessed in like in my city in West Java, it actually changed a lot, because then the punk band go home and bringing this like, oh look, this is actually possible. It's not only in zines or in stories. This is actually happening, and this is what I experienced. Blah 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 blah, and then explaining it to their friends, and then this idea spread, and then you know it like infects people in other cities. It happens as well because it's happened in our city. So I mean, I don't know how to apply that in terms of COVID, because yeah, fuck travel for now. But that's what I see so far, like how global punk networks actually affect each other, and how I see it actually like, I don't know, yeah, enrich them, yeah, the topics, I guess, like, or the shit, I just can't find the English word right now, but yeah, basically enrich like our references. Yeah.
Amazing, thanks. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, maybe to add, I think people like talked a bit about sharing skills, and I think that's, yeah, such an important part of it. And I think with that comes kind of sharing experiences as well. I think often if you find it harder to like find fit in the punk scene, and I know that like a lot of people of color might, and especially in the beginning, you just like don't get those little conversations with experiences of things that have worked and haven't worked. And I think I'm not going to talk about organizing again because I never shut up about it, but I guess like from that perspective, I think a lot of venues are shutting, like poverty lines are rising in the UK and across Europe, and I think a lot of people need support that kind of comes from outside of the state. So I think things like squats and occupations and community centers opening up is something that is going to be really necessary, and kind of underground venues or secret location type of things. And I think it would be really valuable. I know loads of people in the punk scene have done that kind of stuff before. And I think it's really valuable to share that knowledge. I've seen more recently Swarm, just like a sex workers collective, who published a guide on how they ran one of their mutual aid hardship funds, where they basically crowdfunded money and then gave that out to sex workers in need. And there was this really comprehensive guide on how they did it from start to finish. And I think things like that are so useful and necessary, because I think there's loads of people who are up for doing stuff, but who might not know where to start, or who might like do the same mistakes that we've all made and people before me have made. And that can be avoided, and we can learn from it. So yeah, I would add like sharing those kinds of experience, talking about like what kind of world we want to build, and where we're heading as well, is really important, and it sometimes falls a bit short.
Okay, great, amazing. So I guess we've covered this next question slightly, but I guess we could just do it briefly and then go to the Q&A. I want to ask kind of, how has Black Lives Matter and that movement impacted the activism in your communities, or how would you like it to change your punk scene where you are?
So BLM, at least from the Kenyan perspective, it's been, I don't quite know how to put this, but okay, for starters, everybody here is black, if we're being honest. We all just black dudes. So BLM is like a thing that's always been here, but also seeing all the global movements that have been going on the world over, it definitely spurred something in Kenyans and people who live in Nairobi. So in July, there was a protest sort of against police brutality, and the system of oppression that has been going on in Kenya. Unfortunately, on our end, the way police are used in Kenya is as a tool of oppression. So when you show up for protest, regardless of whether it's peaceful, regardless of how many you are, there is going to be tear gas for sure. People are going to be arrested without a doubt. At the very least, we pray for nobody loses their life. So like the last couple of protests we've had in Kenya, given the ongoing pandemic with Corona and everything, there's those of us in the band who cannot participate because we live with people who have underlying health conditions. So what we've done is every time there's a bail fund that's set up, we donate whatever we can towards them. Like all the money we made in July from Bandcamp, streaming and all that, we sort of send it all to a variety of different bail funds in Kenya. We also got together with Hardcore Help Foundation, which is an NGO in Germany. They made this amazing T-shirt, and all the proceeds were going towards a bail fund in the States and another NGO in Germany. So that was amazing. We were happy to do that. So that's sort of how it's been here. So on a more grassroots level, we've been donating as much money as we can to bail funds. So that's, at least from our point of view, that's what we've been doing. And that's sort of how it's impacted Nairobi. It's one of those issues that's always been prevalent here, but seeing other people of color around the world protest, I think it sort of pushed more people here to sort of take to the streets as well, voice our discontent. So that's kind of what we've been doing on our side.
Write a bunch of shit.
Okay.
Write a bunch of shit.
That's great. Has anyone else got anything to add?
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
So, you know, Black Lives Matter is kind of the epicenter of the movements here currently, the uprisings. You know, George Floyd was from Houston. And, you know, we've recently had someone lose their life in Austin at a Black Lives Matter protest. Garrett Foster was killed in Austin. He was at a protest with his girlfriend, you know, and then most recently, the whole situation with Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha. So it's been tough here in the States. So there's been a lot of organizing around these issues. It's been, well, one good thing in Austin was there was some defunding of the police. And unfortunately in Houston, they increased the police budget by 2%, but that's been kind of the main push right now, is just defunding police. And what I've seen in the local scene with all, you know, the evictions and, you know, with COVID, people not being able to afford housing, there's so much unemployment right now, and it's difficult to get unemployment benefits. And especially in Texas, we don't, our state never expanded Medicaid. So, you know, if you're an adult and you don't get your health care through your job, then, you know, you're just kind of out of luck, which I'm sure is just wild to all of you. Like, what? How is that even real? But, you know, I've seen a lot of activism and support within the scenes. One of the things that I've seen that's been really cool to see is the community fridges that have gone up in different neighborhoods. A lot of community fridges have been put around town for people to just come and be able to access healthy foods, fresh foods, and, you know, just trying to support DIY businesses. You know, I mentioned my friend Sean's venue. I went in and just bought a coffee, but, you know, we're trying to help each other as much as we can and keep each other safe and share, you know, safety precautions and you know, what to do when you go out to protest, because like Jay was saying, it's the same here. You know, you have the potential of losing your life, tear gas, you know, being brutalized. So it's been really refreshing though to see all the support and people supporting the bail funds, and you know, trying our best to keep everyone safe. So
Amazing. Thanks so much for that update. And so I think we can go to the Q&A now. Do you think, Marcus?
Yeah, I was going to say, and Nadz is going to have to go, so I'm just going to say thank you to Nadz for joining us. Really appreciate your presence in the panel. I'm going to jump straight. Huh? Yeah, I'm going to jump straight into should I just go from who's... Okay, I'll go. I've gone to the top, and we'll see what we can get through. So from Selena, we've got a question for the panel. I really want to know how I can get involved and how I can help in the local scenes. Could we get a list of the must-see documentaries, or how we can get involved in a lot of these international fundraisers? So if anyone wants to say anything, or maybe we should create a document or post documentary. I remember you were mentioning documentaries and stuff, and so was Alda, because I'm really interested in all of these documentaries. I think maybe, I don't know how we can, maybe you lot could email us actually the list of documentaries, then we can put it out for Decolonise Fest.
For sure.
And if any of you have actually, that's a good question, any fundraisers that you want to plug on here right now in your local area, or you know, or want to answer that question directly?
I don't know. Anyone first?
Sorry, who's going first?
Anyone. It's okay.
Right. Locally, there's a couple of documentaries about the Kenyan scene I would be happy to share. I just need to find the different links. I think Marcus had a really good idea about sort of just putting everything together, compiling it all in one place so everybody can. So I'll be sending Marcus a bunch of stuff, and then I'm sure we'll figure out how to share everything to everybody else.
Definitely.
Right.
Amazing. So we go to the next question. I think that was asked by Bipasha. So Bipasha, for Muslim panelists, how did your family react when you became Punx or got involved in the Punx scene? And she's asking for back then and since, so has it changed? Does anyone want to start?
Haram, bro. My mom told me, yo, this is haram, nigga. Get your shit together. I'm happy we can laugh about it now, but that was sort of the gist of it.
It was so traumatizing. Haram.
So Ahmed is the lead singer of the band, and he's also Muslim as well. So we share a lot of similarities. So I think at first it was literally that, like, this is haram, bro. You cannot be at a club where there's alcohol being served and you're playing. Well, yeah, mom, but you know, we don't do these things.
Making all this loud.
So it definitely took a bit of time on our end to sort of get them on board with everything. Even then, we started this when we were kids. Like, a majority of the gigs we played, we were between the ages of 15 and 18. So I moved to the UK when I was 18 to do my undergrad and all that, which out there, things are very different. I mean, there's no one to tell me what I was doing was haram. So that was very different. But like, that was the general perception. Like now, even now, family is still not overjoyed about it. Spending hella time in clubs. There's videos that come out. The show was smoking, turning up, and all that.
It is amazing in the sense that since we have this like ever globalizing world. 10 years ago, I mean, right now I'm 26. When I was 16, I picked up a bass guitar, and you know, everything I did was so contrary to culture or religion or everything. And with an ever globalizing world, the more videos and the more reality of the world comes out. I've got my mom literally saying, huh, you know what? Maybe Black lives do matter. You know? Yeah, because now it's coming out that like everything that we've believed in, everything we've sung about, everything we've performed about, the world gets to see at the moment. And so I think our art is a very good reflection of society as it always has been. Okay, I'm out. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to build on what AB said, I think like we've been doing this since we were like 15, 16. We put out our first EP when we were like 18, 17. But those were songs that we had written when we were like 15, 16. So it's been absolutely amazing to see our parents be like, holy shit. So you guys actually talking
Yo,
about
this
yeah.
Yo, this
So that's been our experience at least.
Amazing, thanks. Anyone else?
Family reactions to punk.
Family reactions.
The Muslim folk.
Mom ended up apologizing.
So what was that?
My mom ended up apologizing to me.
Oh, really?
I think like 2 years ago. But basically I started being punk after I get kicked out from the house anyway. But I probably thought she thought I'm not gonna survive and go home. But then I survived anyway. So I think she learned some stuff, and like randomly out of nowhere, I think 2 years ago, she called me up and like apologizes and said that because since then she tried to travel a little bit outside Indonesia, and then maybe that also like changed her mind or something. Yeah, she just apologized and think like, oh yeah, I shouldn't force you to be religious if you don't wanna. And I mean, like, obviously, I don't know, like, most of my families are Muslim. I don't have any like hatred towards Muslim. I'm just like thinking no one should be forced into any religion whatsoever, because that is just not healthy. So I think she end up eventually, you know, learning that at a late age and admitting that probably I shouldn't have done that, you know, and I'm really sorry, blah, 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 and have a little teary. And yeah, it's actually quite wholesome in the end. But there was a lot of like fights until that. But in the end,
like, yeah. That's such like a cool turnaround. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm glad.
What's the next? Does anyone else have any? Or we can move to the next question.
Yeah, I would just say the same as Jay, but you know, drums are permissible in Islam.
Really?
I'm kidding. But
Music is haram.
But yeah, it's been a journey for sure. I used to get in trouble all the time for going out to shows. You know, I would get a lecture every time I came home about, you know, Muslim girls don't stay out late, you know, in these bars and venues where they serve alcohol, like Jay was saying. But you know, I can relate to Alda in that, you know, now years later, I think she saw that it was something that was really meaningful to me, and I wasn't doing anything that was you know, kind of harmful to myself or anyone else. And you know, she's seen how the scene has kind of provided me so many opportunities, and so now it's funny because every year she asks about, like, you know, how's the rock camp going, and you know, like, can I help in any way? And you know, because like, it's just kind of become so much a part of who I am, and she sees that, you know, what it's done for me and the campers, and so yeah, she's come around, which has been nice.
That's amazing.
Thank you. There's another question from Nicole O. Has anyone found that BLM has put more of a spotlight on their music or opportunity to be heard than in the past? And I think Jay touched upon that with the BLM stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like for us, because we've been writing about this sort of thing literally since we were kids. So over the last couple of months, we've had a lot of different journalists, reporters sort of reach out like, hey, you guys put out this thing in 2012, but it's still relevant today. Could you talk to us more about that? So Definitely. Like with Leopold, for instance, I was about shedding a light on colonization in Africa and sort of the fact that we all know about Hitler, but nobody knows about Leopold and all that. So there's been a lot of attention in regards to that, a lot of attention in regards to Nyaya House and all that. So yeah, definitely. There's been a lot more because of BLM in terms of our music and getting more of an audience and all that. For us and like for us as musicians and composers, it's been, again, all the music we write has always been thematically within this area. So it's always been, right now where we're at is a matter of trying to figure out how to not come across as being opportunistic, to put across like music that talks about this and that, or just seeming like we're trying to capitalize on this and that. So we've been trying to take our time with our approach and see how we're going to put out more music that is relevant with what's been going on. Punk has always been reactionary, so I expect that over the next couple of months, the next couple of years, there's going to be a lot more in regards to this topic and all of this.
Great. I think, or just to say, I think we just lost Nadz and Alda, but hopefully Alda can come back. Mina, did you have anything to add to that? No? I think the only other question we have is question for you, Muna, and that was someone called iPhone asking, how did you start your booking group?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So Damn Girl, which is, if someone missed that, it's if anyone missed that, it's our DIY booking collective, and basically it was started through as a response basically to kind of the Me Too movement here, and you know, a lot of men in the scene being outed for assault and, you know, other things. So our first project kind of, and well, the way it got started is a lot of the women and volunteers who were involved in the scene and Girls Rock Camp, we kind of networked together, and, you know, women and queer artists or non-binary artists that were in the scene, we kind of put a call out and said that, you know, let's start this off as like a zine project. So we got a grant from the Idea Fund, and in that, you know, we were going to, you know, share things like how to book your own show and things like that. So, you know, we started a Facebook page and an Instagram account and just put the word out that, you know, if you're a queer or non-binary artist or, you know, a woman-fronted band or anything, and you're looking for a safe space to play a show, or know that you're going to interact with people that aren't going to be harmful in any way, we'll help you book a show. So one of our first projects was to create flyers that we asked local venues to put in their bathroom stalls. And in the bathroom stall, you would see a sign that said, you know, if you feel like you're in danger or uncomfortable, or if somebody is harassing you, all these things, you know, here is the word to use at the bar to let them know that it's a code red or a blue or a green, and then they would know to, you know, that you need to be escorted out, you know, with someone, or you needed a certain person to be kicked out that was making you feel unsafe, or if you needed someone to help you call like a ride share, things like that. So that was our first project. It's kind of continued and and blossomed since I left Houston about 3 years ago, but it's still in existence. So so yeah, if you ever need a show booked in Houston, go with that. Go with them. They're amazing.
Amazing, thanks. We will do. Hopefully we can get to Houston soon.
Yeah, probably
All
wrap
right.
it up, right?
Yeah, I think that's all the questions.
Amazingly.
Yeah. Do you want to take us out, Marcus?
Oh, I can take. Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, it's been just so great, and I guess we could all talk for hours on this, but we'll have more discussions in the future. And thank you for tuning in. If any of the panelists and anyone who's watching want to email us info@decolonisefest.org, I think it is, documentaries and networks, global networks and stuff, that would be great. And then maybe we'll put out a PDF or something. And also, yeah, there is the Global Punx of Color Facebook group, which Muna was talking about, which I'm on now as well. So yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. It's the end of the festival. Hopefully next year we will all meet in person. And yeah, just stay safe. We've got merch for sale. You can buy that on the internet. And yeah, I don't know, I can't think of anything else. Also, if you've missed anything, you can stream it. We're gonna post everything up, so it's all being recorded and archived. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. See you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.